The flashing red and blue lights in the rearview mirror usually meant a simple ticket. On a desolate stretch of State Route 209 in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, they meant something far darker. Two corrupt officers believed they had found the perfect mark: a quiet black man driving alone in the dead of night. They intended to plant evidence, destroy his life, and line their own pockets. They made one catastrophic mistake. The man they handcuffed was not a helpless civilian. He was their ultimate boss. Rain fell in heavy sheets across the cracked asphalt of Monroe County, turning the lonely stretch of Route 209 into a slick black mirror. It was 2:17 a.m., the kind of hour when the only souls on the road were long-haul truckers, graveyard shift workers, and people with bad intentions. Parked in a gravel turnout near the county line, partially hidden behind a rusted billboard advertising a long-closed hunting lodge, sat a Monroe County Sheriff's Department cruiser. Inside were Deputy Desmond Carter and his younger partner, Deputy Cole Brennan. Carter was a 15-year veteran whose moral compass had rusted solid more than a decade earlier. He chewed a toothpick, his heavy frame spilling over the duty belt that cut into his waist. Beside him, Brennan nervously tapped his fingers against the steering wheel. Brennan had only 2 years on the job, but under Carter's guidance, he had learned quickly that the law in Monroe County was not something you enforced. It was something you used. Their precinct, the notorious 4th District, operated like a quiet cartel under the protection of Captain Victor Harlan. The system was simple: target out-of-towners, minorities, or anyone who looked like they could not afford a good lawyer. Fabricate probable cause, conduct illegal searches, seize cash under the banner of civil asset forfeiture. If the victim complained, it was their word against 2 sworn officers. The conviction rate looked impressive on paper. The corruption underneath was absolute. "Dead night," Brennan muttered, stifling a yawn and reaching for his lukewarm coffee. "We haven't hit our numbers for the week, Des. Harlan's going to be breathing down our necks if we don't bring something in by shift's end." Carter spat the toothpick out the cracked window into the rain. "Patience, kid. The night always provides. You're looking for speeders. I'm looking for prey." A few miles down the road, a dark blue 2018 Ford Taurus cruised exactly at the speed limit of 55. Behind the wheel sat Isaiah Montgomery. At 48, Isaiah had a face carved from hard experience, lined by years of uphill battles. He wore a simple gray Henley and dark jeans, looking every bit like an exhausted mid-level manager finishing a long commute. He was not. Exactly 3 weeks earlier, the governor had appointed him director of the Pennsylvania State Police and the State Bureau of Investigation. The appointment had been a political earthquake. Isaiah was an outsider with a federal reputation as a relentless, incorruptible investigator who specialized in dismantling organized crime and corrupt public officials. The governor had given him one mandate: clean house. The state police and the county sheriff's departments had become a tangled mess of nepotism, bribery, and civil rights abuses. Monroe County's 4th District sat at the very top of Isaiah's list. Instead of announcing himself with press conferences and internal affairs teams, Isaiah had chosen a quieter approach. He wanted to see the rot firsthand. For 3 nights, he had driven unmarked civilian vehicles through the state's most notorious jurisdictions, waiting to learn what happened to an average black man driving alone in the early hours. As the Taurus approached the rusted billboard, Isaiah's sharp eyes caught the faint reflection of a cruiser's decal in the shadows. He did not tap the brakes. He held his speed with perfect discipline, hands at 10 and 2. Inside the cruiser, Carter sat up, predatory instincts flaring. "Look at this guy," he sneered, pointing a thick finger at the passing Ford. "Driving a little too perfect, don't you think? Hands locked, not a mile over the limit. He's nervous." "Plates are clean," Brennan said, typing the tag into the mobile data terminal. "Registered to an I. Montgomery out of Harrisburg. No warrants. Clean record." Clean record just means he hasn't been caught yet, Carter replied, a cruel smile stretching across his face. Out-of-town plates, middle of nowhere. That's our guy. Lights on, Cole. Let's go hunting. Brennan flipped the switch. The light bar erupted into a blinding strobe of red and blue that tore through the rainy darkness. The cruiser's engine roared as it surged out of the gravel and closed the distance in seconds. Isaiah saw the lights in his rearview mirror. A deep, steadying breath filled his lungs. Cold, calculated calm settled over him. He reached up and tapped a small disguised button on the rearview mirror, activating a high-definition dash camera hardwired to a secure encrypted cloud server monitored by his trusted inner circle at the State Bureau of Investigation. He tapped another sequence on his smartwatch, activating a hidden microphone woven into the collar of his shirt. Let's see just how deep this goes, he thought. He flipped on his right turn signal and pulled the Taurus smoothly onto the muddy shoulder, shifting into park. He rolled the window down and placed both hands clearly on the top of the steering wheel. He waited. Heavy boots crunched against wet gravel. Deputy Desmond Carter approached with deliberate slowness. The beam of a high-powered tactical flashlight stabbed through the driver's window, deliberately aimed at Isaiah's eye level, a classic intimidation tactic meant to disorient and establish dominance. "You know why I pulled you over tonight, boy?" Carter's voice was a low, gravelly rasp, thick with condescension. The word boy hung in the damp air, a calculated insult. Isaiah blinked against the light, but did not shift his posture. His voice came out calm, resonant, and completely free of the fear Carter expected. "I'm afraid I don't, Deputy. I was maintaining the speed limit and staying in my lane." "You were drifting," Carter lied smoothly. "Crossed the yellow line back by the mile marker. Plus, your window tint looks illegal. License, registration, and proof of insurance. Now." Isaiah moved his right hand slowly toward his back pocket. "I am reaching for my wallet, Deputy. My license is inside." "Move slow." Carter's hand rested on the butt of his sidearm. On the passenger side, Brennan approached with his own flashlight, scanning the back seat and floorboards for any excuse to escalate. Isaiah retrieved his wallet and deliberately left the gold director's badge and state credentials tucked deep inside the leather. If he showed them now, the two men would collapse into apologies and retreat. Isaiah needed them to reveal exactly what they were. He handed over the plastic driver's license. Carter snatched it and shone his light on the card. "Isaiah Montgomery, Harrisburg. What brings you out to Monroe County at 2 a.m? Looking for somewhere to buy drugs?" "I was just out for a drive," Isaiah replied evenly. "Clearing my head. Is it a crime to drive on a public highway, Deputy?" Carter leaned in close. The smell of stale tobacco and bitter coffee filled the car. "Don't get smart with me. People from Harrisburg don't take 2-hour midnight drives into Monroe County unless they're running something. Step out of the vehicle." "For a traffic violation?" Isaiah asked, testing the boundary just enough. "Under Pennsylvania versus Mims, you have the right to order me out, but I'd like to know if I am being detained or if I am free to go." Carter's eyes narrowed. He hated citizens who knew their rights. "Oh, we got a roadside lawyer here, Cole," he shouted over the roof. "Listen carefully. You are going to unbuckle that seatbelt and step out of this car, or I am going to drag you out through this window and charge you with resisting. Do you understand?" "I will comply with your order," Isaiah said, voice deliberately flat. He unbuckled and stepped out into the freezing rain, standing at his full 6'2" height, forcing Carter to take a half step back. "Turn around, hands on the roof." Isaiah turned and placed his hands on the cold, wet metal. Without warning, Carter kicked his legs apart and began a rough, invasive pat-down, slamming a forearm into Isaiah's back and pressing him hard against the car. "Got any weapons on you? Needles? Anything that's gonna stick me?" Carter rifled through pockets, pulled out the wallet, and tossed it carelessly onto the trunk. He snatched Isaiah's cell phone and shoved it into his own pocket. "I am unarmed," Isaiah said quietly, "and I do not consent to any searches of my person or my vehicle." "I don't care what you consent to." Carter looked over at Brennan. "Cole, I thought I smelled marijuana when he rolled the window down. Did you smell marijuana?" Brennan hesitated a fraction of a second, then fell into the practiced routine. "Yes, sir. Overpowering odor of unburnt marijuana coming from the cabin." "Well, look at that," Carter said mockingly. "Probable cause. Toss the car." Isaiah watched in the reflection of the wet window as Brennan tore through the interior, ripping open the glove box, emptying the center console, checking under the seats. Isaiah's heart beat with a steady, furious rhythm. He was living exactly what thousands of innocent citizens had endured at these men's hands. 3 minutes later, Brennan emerged, holding a small, clear plastic baggie containing a white crystalline substance. "Look what I found tucked under the driver's seat," he said, voice trembling slightly with the adrenaline of the lie. "Looks like crystal meth," Carter chuckled, a dark, venomous sound. He wrenched Isaiah's arms behind his back. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit hard into Isaiah's wrists as Carter ratcheted them down as tightly as they would go, deliberately cutting off circulation. "Well, well, well, Mr. Roadside Lawyer," Carter whispered into Isaiah's ear. "Looks like you're going away for a long time. Possession of a Schedule II narcotic with intent to distribute. That's a felony." "That isn't mine," Isaiah said, voice carrying absolute authority, even in his position. "You planted that." "Prove it," Carter laughed, shoving him toward the cruiser. "My partner and I are sworn officers of the law. You're just a thug from the city. Who do you think the judge is going to believe?" Isaiah did not resist as Carter grabbed the collar of his jacket, forced his head down, and pushed him into the cramped hard plastic back seat. The heavy metal door slammed shut. Isaiah sat in the suffocating silence of the cage, rain hammering the roof. His wrists burned, but a fierce, triumphant fire burned hotter in his chest. "You just signed your own arrest warrants," he thought. "Every single one of you." The interior of the cruiser smelled of stale sweat, industrial cleaner, and cheap pine air freshener trying to mask the scent of earlier arrests. Isaiah sat motionless, the hard plastic digging into his spine. His hands were going numb. He focused past the pain and onto the microphone in his collar, willing it to capture every word. The front doors opened. Carter and Brennan climbed in, bringing the smell of damp wool and rain. Carter tossed Isaiah's wallet and phone onto the dashboard without even opening the wallet. In his mind, the man in the back was already a statistic. Carter shifted into drive. The tires spun briefly in the gravel before gripping asphalt and accelerating back onto Route 209. "Man, that was too easy," Carter chuckled, adjusting the rearview mirror so he could lock eyes with Isaiah. "You Harrisburg boys come out here thinking you own the world. Let me tell you something, Montgomery. Out here in Monroe County, I am God. What I say goes." Brennan laughed nervously and tossed the baggie of planted meth onto the center console. "Think Harlan will authorize a civil asset seizure on the Taurus? It's a nice car. Might fetch a few grand at the county auction." "Absolutely," Carter said. "Vehicle used in the transport and distribution of narcotics. It belongs to the department now. We'll split the cash bonus. Might finally get that new base boat I've been looking at." Isaiah sat in the darkness, letting their words wash over him, memorizing every confession. Under federal law, conspiracy to deprive a person of civil rights under color of law was a massive felony carrying decades in federal prison. "You officers seem remarkably comfortable discussing fabricated evidence," Isaiah said. His voice cut through the hum of the engine. Calm, articulate, completely free of panic. Carter scowled into the mirror. "Shut your mouth, crackhead. You don't have a say in this anymore." "I'm just curious," Isaiah continued, tone conversational but edged with something lethal. "How many innocent people have you framed to meet your quotas? How many lives have you ruined for a bonus on a paycheck?" Brennan turned in his seat. "You need to learn when to shut up, buddy. You're already looking at 5 to 10. Don't make it worse. I think you boys have made it as bad as it can possibly get, Isaiah replied coldly. But not for me. Have you ever heard of the word hubris, Deputy Carter? It's when arrogance leads to a man's ultimate downfall. Carter slammed on the brakes in the middle of the empty highway. The cruiser skidded on the wet asphalt, throwing Isaiah hard against the metal cage. Carter threw the car into park and spun around, face purple with rage. "Listen to me, you piece of garbage," he spat, spittle hitting the plexiglass. "You think you're smart? You think anyone is going to care what a convicted drug dealer has to say? When we get to the 4th precinct, I'm going to throw you in an unmonitored holding cell. We're going to have a little interrogation. By the time the sun comes up, you're going to sign a full confession admitting those drugs were yours, or you're leaving that precinct in an ambulance. Do we understand each other?" Isaiah stared back, dark eyes unblinking, reflecting the green glow of the dashboard. "I understand perfectly, Deputy Carter. I understand exactly how your precinct operates." Carter scoffed, turned around, and slammed the car into gear. "Stupid punk, you're all the same." The rest of the drive passed in tense, hostile silence. 20 minutes later, the cruiser turned off the main highway and headed down a poorly lit industrial road on the outskirts of Stroudsburg. At the end of the road, looming like a concrete fortress against the rainy night, stood the Monroe County 4th Precinct, a brutalist block of gray stone surrounded by chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Few windows. It looked more like a bunker than a police station. Several other cruisers sat haphazardly outside. 3 officers stood under the awning near the back entrance, smoking and laughing. "Home sweet home," Carter mocked as he pulled into the sally port and killed the engine. Brennan grabbed the baggie and Isaiah's wallet. Carter yanked the rear door open, grabbed Isaiah by the collar, and hauled him out without support. Isaiah stumbled slightly on numb hands. "Walk," Carter commanded, shoving him toward the heavy metal doors. The officers outside turned. "What you got there, Carter?" a tall, bald deputy asked, flicking his cigarette onto the wet concrete. "Another city boy pushing crystal on our roads," Carter announced proudly. "Found a bag under his seat. He's got a bit of an attitude problem, though." The bald deputy, Deputy Gregson, laughed and stepped aside to open the steel door. "Take him down to interrogation room B. Cameras in there have been malfunctioning all week. Take your time." Isaiah was pushed into the harsh, flickering fluorescent lights of the precinct. The air was stifling, thick with cheap floor wax and old sweat. As they marched him down the long linoleum hallway toward the booking desk, he scanned everything. Officers sleeping at desks, civilian clerks looking the other way, the complete absence of protocol. A department that had surrendered entirely to rot. Behind the high wooden booking desk sat Desk Sergeant Miller, a bored man reading a sports magazine. "Got a booking for you, Miller," Carter said, shoving Isaiah against the front of the desk. "Felony possession. Put him in holding cell 4 while Brennan and I write up the report." Miller sighed without looking up. "Name?" "Isaiah Montgomery," Carter said. Brennan tossed the leather wallet onto the desk. It landed with a heavy, solid thud. "All right," Miller grunted, finally setting the magazine aside. He reached for the wallet. "Let's see who we have here." Isaiah stood quietly, cuffed hands aching, heart beating a steady, victorious rhythm. He watched Miller flip open the leather. The bored expression vanished instantly. Color drained from Miller's face until he looked a ghastly shade of gray. He was not looking at the driver's license. His eyes were locked on the left side of the wallet, where a solid gold 7-point star badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Beneath it sat an encrypted holographic identification card. It read, "Isaiah Montgomery, Director, Pennsylvania State Police and State Bureau of Investigation." Miller slowly lifted his head. Wide, terrified eyes shifted from the gold badge to the quiet, cuffed black man standing in front of his desk. His jaw worked silently. "Something wrong, Miller?" Carter asked, oblivious, arms crossed, leaning against the desk. Hurry up and log him in. I want to get to the fun part. Miller looked at Carter, hands trembling violently as he pointed a shaking finger at the open wallet. Des, Carter, look at the badge. The silence in the booking area became deafening. The only sound was the harsh, irregular hum of the overhead lights. Sergeant Miller remained frozen. Carter frowned and pushed himself off the desk. What is your problem, Miller? It's just an ID. Stop looking like you've seen a ghost and book the man. Carter's eyes dropped to the wallet. He looked at the Pennsylvania driver's license. Then his gaze slid left. The solid gold 7-point star caught the light. Above it, bold black lettering on the holographic card spelled out a reality Carter's brain violently refused to accept. Director, State Police, State Bureau of Investigation. Carter stopped breathing. Color drained from his face so fast he looked as if he might pass out. He stared at the badge, then slowly, mechanically, turned his head to look at the cuffed man standing calmly in the center of the lobby. Isaiah Montgomery was not looking at the floor. His chin was up, shoulders square, eyes locked on Carter with the cold, immovable weight of absolute authority. This, Carter's voice was barely a whisper. He cleared his dry throat. The arrogant gravel was gone. This is a fake. This is a joke. Brennan, standing a few feet away, felt cold sweat break out on the back of his neck. He stepped forward and peered over Carter's shoulder. When he saw the badge, his knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the booking desk to keep from collapsing. Des, Brennan whimpered, voice cracking. Des, look at the seal. It's got the governor's biometric watermark. You can't fake that. I said it's a fake, Carter shouted, voice echoing off the concrete walls. His hand dropped instinctively to the butt of his duty weapon, the visceral, panicked reaction of a cornered animal. If this was real, his life was over. Pension, freedom, everything. There is a QR code on the back of the credential card, Deputy Brennan, Isaiah said. His voice rang through the lobby with a commanding resonance that demanded obedience. Take out your department-issued smartphone. Scan it. It links directly to the secure encrypted database in Harrisburg. Brennan, acting entirely out of sheer terror, fumbled for his phone. His hand shook so badly he dropped it. He scrambled to pick it up, opened the scanner, and held it over the wallet. A quiet beep chirped in the silent room. Brennan stared at the screen. The official state police portal loaded instantly. A high-resolution photograph of Isaiah Montgomery appeared, flanked by green verification checkmarks. Beneath the photo, a red banner flashed. Clearance level. Absolute do not detain. Oh my God, Brennan gasped. Tears welled in his eyes. He backed away from Isaiah as if the man were radioactive. Oh my God, Des, it's him. It's really him. We just arrested the director of the state police. Shut up, Cole, Carter roared, drawing his weapon halfway out of its holster. He's a Fed impersonator. He set us up. We take him out back right now. We say he went for a gun. We wipe the cruiser dash cam. The absolute insanity of the words hung in the air. Deputy Gregson, who had been smoking outside, stepped into the lobby and froze, hands instinctively rising. Whoa, Carter, have you lost your mind? Put the gun down. Isaiah did not flinch. He did not break eye contact with Carter. Draw that weapon, Carter, and you will make the worst decision of your miserable life. If you pull that trigger, you won't just face federal prison. You will be hunted by every law enforcement agency in this country. The heavy reinforced doors to the administrative wing swung open and slammed against the wall. Captain Victor Harlan stepped out of the shadows. He was meticulously groomed, wearing a tailored uniform with silver eagles on the collar. The mastermind who had spent 2 decades turning a public office into a personal syndicate. What in God's name is going on out here? Harlan barked, sharp eyes darting from Carter's half-drawn weapon to the cuffed man in the center of the room. Carter, secure that weapon right now, or I'll have you stripped of your badge. Carter shoved the gun back into the holster, chest heaving, eyes wide and manic. "Captain, this guy, he had meth in the car, I swear, but he's carrying fake federal ID. He's trying to set us up." Harlan marched to the booking desk and looked down at the wallet. He was an intelligent, calculating man who kept close watch on state politics to protect his operation. He had read the internal memos. He had seen the confidential briefings about the new director. As he looked at the photograph in the wallet and then up at Isaiah's face, the arrogant scowl melted into sheer, unadulterated horror. "Director Montgomery," the words tasted like ash in Harlan's mouth. Captain Harlan was a survivor. His immediate instinct was damage control. He plastered a look of absolute outrage onto his face and spun on his officers. "Get those cuffs off him," he roared, pointing a trembling finger at Carter. "Get the keys right now and take those cuffs off him, you incompetent fool." Carter, still paralyzed by panic, fumbled for the keys. He stepped toward Isaiah, hands shaking so badly they rattled against each other. "Stop!" Isaiah's command froze Carter in place. "Do not touch me, Deputy Carter." He turned his attention to the captain. "Leave the handcuffs on. When the federal prosecutors photograph the deep tissue bruising on my wrists, I want them to see exactly how tightly your men apply restraints to compliant citizens." Harlan swallowed hard, desperately trying to regain control. "Director Montgomery, please. This is a colossal misunderstanding. Deputy Carter is a rogue element in this department. I assure you, I had no knowledge of this traffic stop. If he planted evidence, he will be fired and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." Isaiah let out a low, humorless laugh. "Do not insult my intelligence, Captain Harlan. A rogue element. I have spent the last 6 months investigating your precinct's financials. I know about the civil asset forfeitures. I know about the undocumented cash seizures funneled through the Stroudsburg municipal shell accounts. Deputy Carter and Deputy Brennan were not acting alone. They were executing a well-rehearsed systemic protocol, one that you designed." Brennan let out a loud sob and buried his face in his hands. "I told you, Des. I told you we shouldn't have pulled him over." "Shut up!" Carter yelled, looking wildly around the room. He lunged for the baggie of meth on the booking desk. "This is his! He had it in his car! He's a dirty—" "Put it down, Carter!" Harlan screamed, realizing the panic was digging their grave deeper by the second. He turned back to Isaiah, lowering his voice, trying for a conspiratorial professional tone. "Director, let's go to my office. Let's sit down, get those cuffs off and discuss how we can handle this quietly. There's no need to burn down the entire department. We can come to an arrangement." "An arrangement?" Isaiah's eyes narrowed into dark slits. "Let me explain the arrangement you currently have, Victor. Over the last 45 minutes, your men have committed kidnapping, false imprisonment, aggravated assault under color of law, and conspiracy to fabricate evidence in violation of 18 U.S.C. sections 241 and 242. That is a federal crime." Harlan's jaw tightened. The diplomatic facade cracked, revealing the cornered criminal underneath. "You came into my jurisdiction under false pretenses. It's entrapment. It won't hold up in court. It's your word against 3 sworn officers." "My word," Isaiah smiled, a terrifying, victorious smile. "Do you honestly think a man with my background walks into a snake pit without wearing boots?" He turned his head slightly, nodding toward his right shoulder. "Underneath the collar of this shirt is a microtransmitter. It isn't just recording our conversation, Captain. It's transmitting a live encrypted audio feed directly to the FBI Public Corruption Unit in Philadelphia. Special Agent Richard Sullivan has been listening to every single word Deputy Carter said in that cruiser, and every word you are saying right now." Harlan took a step back, as if he had been physically struck. "No, and that's not all," Isaiah continued relentlessly. "The dash camera in my vehicle is hardwired to the state attorney general's cloud server. We watched Deputy Brennan search my empty car. We watched him miraculously find a bag of methamphetamine that he pulled out of his own tactical vest. By now, warrants have already been signed by Federal Judge Eleanor Davies. It's over, Victor. The game is entirely over. The silence that followed was absolute. Carter dropped the baggie. It hit the linoleum and scattered white crystals across the wax. Brennan slid down the wall, knees pulled to his chest, weeping openly. Sergeant Miller had both hands on his head, staring blankly at the wall. Then every landline in the building began to flash and scream simultaneously. A frantic young dispatcher burst through the dispatch room doors, headset in hand. "Captain!" she yelled, panic in her eyes. "Captain Harlan, I don't know what's happening. The state police just took over our radio frequencies. They're demanding we stand down." Before Harlan could open his mouth, a low mechanical rumble vibrated through the floorboards. It grew louder, a heavy rhythmic thrumming of massive diesel engines outside. Red and blue strobe lights exploded through the small frosted windows of the lobby, casting chaotic rotating shadows across the walls. The sound of screeching tires and heavy boots hitting pavement echoed from the parking lot. A voice boomed over a high-powered tactical megaphone, shaking the reinforced glass of the front doors. "Monroe County Sheriff's Department. This is the Pennsylvania State Police Special Emergency Response Team. You are surrounded. Step away from your weapons. Unlock the front doors and exit with your hands in the air." Isaiah stood tall in his handcuffs, watching the empire of dirt crumble around Captain Harlan. "I suggest you open the door, Victor. They aren't going to ask twice." The booming voice from the tactical megaphone reverberated through the concrete walls, rattling the cheap fluorescent fixtures. Outside, the rhythmic idling of armored Bearcat vehicles created a low, terrifying earthquake that shook the linoleum. Flashing red and blue strobes painted the horrified faces of the corrupt officers in alternating shades of crimson and sapphire. Captain Victor Harlan stood entirely paralyzed. For 20 years he had operated this precinct like a medieval warlord defending an impenetrable castle. Now the walls were closing in, and the drawbridge was on fire. "Open the door, Victor," Isaiah repeated, the only calm sound in the chaotic room. Despite his hands still painfully bound behind his back, he radiated absolute control. "If they have to breach, they are coming through with flashbangs and rifles drawn. Do not let your men die for your greed." Deputy Gregson did not wait for the captain's order. Panic completely overrode loyalty. He threw his hands in the air and sprinted toward the heavy steel front doors. "Don't shoot! We're opening the doors! We're surrendering!" He fumbled with the deadbolts, threw the doors open, and dropped flat onto his stomach on the wet concrete, lacing his fingers behind his head. Through the open doorway, the reality of Harlan's nightmare materialized. Over 36 state police SERT operators stood in a tightly coordinated perimeter, assault rifles raised, laser sights cutting through the misty rain. Behind them, federal agents and FBI windbreakers were already setting up a mobile command center out of the back of a black SUV. "Hands! Let me see your hands! Step away from the weapons!" shouted the lead tactical commander, a heavily armored man with Mitchell stenciled on his ballistic helmet. Half a dozen operators flooded into the lobby with terrifying speed and precision. Desk Sergeant Miller immediately dropped to his knees, sobbing as an operator roughly zip-tied his wrists. Deputy Desmond Carter, his mind completely broken by the scale of the raid, let out a primal yell and reached for his holster in a last suicidal act of defiance. Before Carter's hand could even graze the grip, a SERT operator slammed the heavy stock of a rifle into his chest, sending the large man crashing violently onto a row of plastic waiting chairs. 3 operators were on him in a fraction of a second, pinning him to the floor, disarming him, and ratcheting heavy plastic flex cuffs around his wrists. Carter thrashed like a wild animal, screaming incoherently until an operator pressed a knee firmly between his shoulder blades. Commander Mitchell bypassed the chaos and walked directly to the center of the lobby. He holstered his sidearm and pulled a universal handcuff key from his tactical belt. "Director Montgomery," Mitchell said, voice clipped and professional. "Are you injured, sir?" "Just my pride, Commander," Isaiah replied coolly, turning so Mitchell could access the cuffs. The heavy steel ratchets clicked open. Isaiah brought his arms forward and winced slightly, rubbing the deep, angry red indentations carved into his wrists. Circulation returned in a painful rush of pins and needles. He ignored it. "Medical is standing by outside, sir," Mitchell offered. "No time," Isaiah said, rolling his shoulders and locking eyes with Harlan, who was now surrounded by 3 heavily armed state troopers. Harlan's tailored uniform was rumpled, his arrogant posture completely shattered. "Wait!" Brennan suddenly shrieked. The young deputy was still sitting on the floor, hyperventilating, eyes darting frantically. He pointed a shaking finger directly at Harlan. "Stop him! He has a kill switch! His phone!" Harlan's eyes widened in sheer panic. He had been slowly reaching into his trouser pocket for a specialized encrypted phone that controlled the precinct's offshore shell accounts and the local server drives holding decades of illegal transaction ledgers. One button press and the evidence would be magnetically wiped. But Brennan, desperate to save his own skin, lunged forward. Before the tactical operators could react, Brennan tackled his own captain, sending both men crashing into the booking desk. "He's wiping the servers!" Brennan screamed, grappling for the phone. "I'll testify. I'll tell you everything. The cash houses, the fake warrants, the judge he pays off. I'll give you all of it. Just give me a deal." An operator yanked Brennan off Harlan and tossed him aside. Mitchell pinned Harlan's wrist to the floor and pried the black smartphone from his grip before the captain could unlock the screen. Isaiah walked slowly over to where Harlan lay pinned on the linoleum. He looked down at the disgraced captain, then shifted his gaze to Brennan, who was weeping and begging for a plea deal from the floor. "There is no honor among thieves, Victor," Isaiah said softly. "The moment the ship takes on water, the rats will drown each other to reach the top of the mast. You built a precinct entirely on greed and fear. Did you really think loyalty would survive tonight?" Harlan glared up, face twisted in a snarl of bitter hatred. "You think you've won, Montgomery? You think this ends with me? The system is too deep. You don't even know whose toes you're stepping on." "Oh, I have a fairly good idea," Isaiah replied, signaling for the FBI agents to enter. Special Agent Richard Sullivan, a tall man with silver hair and sharp analytical eyes, walked through the doors holding a reinforced evidence box. "Director," he nodded respectfully, "the warrants for the entire building have been executed. My teams are moving into the evidence locker and the captain's administrative wing now." "Tear it down to the studs, Richard," Isaiah ordered. "I want the floorboards pulled up. I want the ceiling tiles checked. I want every single case file, every logbook, and every dash cam hard drive seized. This precinct ceases to exist as of this moment." Over the next 3 hours, the depth of the 4th District's rot was exposed to the harsh light of reality. FBI forensic accountants and State Bureau investigators swarmed the building. Behind a false wall in the evidence room, they discovered more than $2 million in shrink-wrapped cash stacked haphazardly next to stolen firearms and kilos of narcotics that had supposedly been destroyed years earlier. But the most damning discovery came from Captain Harlan's private office. Hidden inside a hollowed-out ventilation duct was a physical, handwritten ledger. It was not merely a list of victims robbed on the highway. It was a master payroll of corruption. Isaiah sat at Harlan's mahogany desk, carefully flipping through the leather-bound book while Agent Sullivan read over his shoulder. The names inside were explosive. Local magistrates who signed blank search warrants in exchange for a cut of the seized assets. Municipal zoning officials who used the police to intimidate business owners into selling land for pennies. And then Isaiah stopped on a page dated just 3 months prior. He traced his finger over a single name, underlined in red ink. State Senator Robert Hayes, $50,000 campaign contribution via Shell Corporation. Sullivan let out a low whistle. Senator Hayes, chairman of the State Police Oversight Committee, the man who most vehemently opposed your appointment as director. Isaiah closed the ledger. A cold, dangerous fire burned in his eyes. Harlan was right about one thing. The system was deep. He was just the attack dog for the real predators. And now we have their leash. By 6:12 a.m., the rain had finally stopped, giving way to a pale, bruised dawn over Monroe County. But the darkness that had blanketed the 4th Precinct for so long was permanently shattered by the glaring lights of media satellite trucks. Isaiah had not kept this raid a secret. He knew sunlight was the best disinfectant, and he wanted the entire state to watch the fortress fall. He had authorized his press office to tip off the major networks an hour before sunrise. Now a massive crowd of reporters, cameramen, and shocked local residents stood behind yellow police tape, watching an unprecedented spectacle unfold. One by one, the corrupt officers of the Monroe County 4th District were marched out of the front doors in handcuffs. Deputy Desmond Carter was the first to face the cameras. He looked exhausted, broken, and terrified. The arrogance that had fueled him only hours earlier was gone. As he was led toward a federal transport van, the crowd erupted. Residents who had been terrorized, harassed, and robbed by Carter over the years shouted his name, demanding justice. Carter kept his head down, refusing to look at the people whose lives he had tried to destroy. Next came Deputy Cole Brennan. He was not walking with defiance. He was practically being dragged, sobbing loudly, a stark reminder of the cowardice that always underpins abuse of power. His desperate attempts to secure a plea deal had yielded no immediate promises. He was going to a federal holding cell with the rest of them. Finally, Captain Victor Harlan was brought out. He walked stiffly, jaw clenched tight, trying desperately to maintain a shred of dignity. But as the cameras flashed violently in his face, the reality of his situation settled in. He was a disgraced, indicted felon staring down the barrel of a life sentence in a federal penitentiary. Isaiah Montgomery stood under the concrete awning of the precinct, arms crossed over his chest, watching the transport vans load up. Special Agent Sullivan stood beside him, holding the sealed evidence box containing the ledger. Harlan stopped at the door of the transport van and looked back at Isaiah. The distance between them was only 30 feet, but it was an unbridgeable chasm between justice and corruption. Harlan stared, a silent promise of vengeance in his eyes. Isaiah did not break his gaze. He simply gave a slow, deliberate nod, an acknowledgement of the war that had just begun. "He's going to turn state's evidence before the end of the week," Sullivan murmured as the van doors slammed shut. "When he realizes Senator Hayes isn't going to protect him, he'll sing like a bird to save himself from a maximum security block." "Let him sing," Isaiah replied, voice rough with exhaustion but laced with unyielding resolve. "We'll use his testimony to arrest Hayes, and when we have Hayes, we'll see who he gives up. We are going to pull this weed out by the absolute bottom of the root, Richard. It's going to be a bloodbath in the state capitol, Isaiah. You're declaring war on the political establishment." Isaiah turned away from the media circus and looked out toward the rising sun. The golden light caught the edge of the gold badge now proudly pinned to his belt. "They declared war on the people a long time ago," he said softly. "I'm just the man who finally shot back." The fall of the Monroe County 4th Precinct sent a shockwave across the entire country. The dashcam footage of Isaiah's arrest, coupled with the audio recordings of Carter and Brennan plotting to plant the crystal meth, was leaked to the press by the end of the week. The footage went viral, dominating national news cycles and sparking widespread investigations into civil asset forfeiture laws and police corruption. Brennan, terrified of prison, fully cooperated with federal prosecutors. His testimony corroborated the physical evidence found in the precinct. Deputy Desmond Carter was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for civil rights violations. evidence tampering, and racketeering. Captain Victor Harlan attempted to fight the charges, leaning on his political connections, but the ledger was undeniable. When Senator Robert Hayes was publicly arrested at a charity gala 3 weeks later, Harlan realized he was entirely alone. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 30 years without the possibility of parole. As for Isaiah Montgomery, he did not hold a victory parade. He did not go on a press tour. The morning after the raid, at exactly 8 a.m., he walked into his office at the State Bureau of Investigation in Harrisburg, poured himself a black coffee, and opened the next file on his desk. The 4th precinct was gone, but the rot was everywhere, and the new director had only just begun to clean house.